This is a woman running away from her captors, having been kidnapped and missing for 3 weeks. Or was she lying? Like a page out of Gone Girl, prepare yourself for the true story of Sherri Papini. Sherri was born on the 11th of June 1982 in California to parents Loretta and Richard. She had one sister, Sheila. She married her first husband, David, in 2006, aged 24. This marriage didn't last long and they ended up separating shortly after. She then married Keith Papini in 2009, whom she had known since school. Their relationship moved pretty quickly and they had a son, Tyler, and then a daughter, Violet. Sherri was a full-time mum and devoted to her kids. She was known as being a very good mother. To everybody else, this family seemed like a very average Californian family. They would go on beach trips, the dad worked full-time, the mum stayed at home with the kids. They seemed very happy, very average, until November the 2nd, 2016. Keith arrives home expecting to see his wife and children. However, when he gets back, the house is completely empty. The last time he heard from Sherri was around 10 AM that day, and she never mentioned having any kind of after-school plans or events to go to that evening. Initially, he isn't worried. He thinks maybe they're just running errands, but he does call the daycare to find out what time his wife picked up their kids. They inform him that the kids have not been picked up. Keith now gets incredibly worried and he calls his mum to organise for her to pick up his kids whilst he goes out searching for his wife. Keith knows that Sherri has taken up jogging and she often goes alone, so he thinks maybe she's hurt herself, lost track of time. He uses an app like a Find My iPhone app and that pinpoints her location, so he goes straight up there and it's on one of the trails that Sherri would jog. When he gets there, all he sees is her phone and her earbuds. Now he's really worried, so he calls 911 and reports her as missing.
So I just got home from work and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual, and my kids should have been there by now from like daycare. So I was like, oh, maybe she went on a walk. I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out, so I hit like the Find My iPhone app thing, and it said that it showed her phone like at our end of our driveway. We don't have really good service.
Okay.
Not the end of our driveway, but the end of our street. So I just drove down there, and I saw her phone with her headphones because she started running again, and I found her phone, and it's got like hair ripped out of it, like in the headphones. So I'm like totally freaking out, thinking like somebody grabbed her. Telling me that something happened to her is the way I'm looking at it.
He's beginning to panic, as you can hear in his voice. He thinks something terrible has happened to Sherri. When police arrive and they begin asking around the neighbourhood, no one saw anything unusual. Someone did see Sherri jogging at around 2 PM that day. There was a huge search and a sense of urgency to find her. This case got a huge amount of media attention from the beginning, which a lot of missing cases don't. Volunteers were out in their hundreds, police were out with canines, but they found nothing. Keith also made several media appearances to keep her name in the press. He felt as though the police weren't doing enough. The police felt that he was compromising their investigation by giving so many media appearances. So there was tension and conflict from the beginning. Because of the media attention that this case got, mainly because of Keith's regular appearances, and an anonymous donor came forward offering $50,000 for the safe return of Sherri. Now, police said this wouldn't work without kind of a face to this kind of donation. A friend of the Papini family suggested they use a man called Cameron Gamble. She had met him briefly at a local club, but believed he would be the perfect face and personality to make this reward convincing and potentially work. Cameron was a former pilot who actually had experience with hostage situations and releasing victims of kidnappings, so he kind of reluctantly agrees. It takes a little convincing, but he does it in the end. He records a video saying that the kidnapper has 100 hours to return Sherri safely. They will then be given $50,000, no questions asked. They just want Sherri back. 100 hours go by and nothing. They don't hear anything from the abductors, nothing from Sherri. So they come up with another plan. They decide to reverse it. They double the reward and offer $100,000 for any information that leads to the capture of the abductors. This video is released on November the 23rd of 2016, and the day after, on Thanksgiving, November the 24th, Sherri is found 150 miles from her home. She had been gone for a total of 22 days. At 4 a.m. that morning, a lady called Alice Sutton had been driving her teenage daughter through the Yolo County when she suddenly spotted a very panicked and scared looking woman at the side of the road.
She had like a wide-eyed, panicked kind of look. I was startled to see her. It was dark and she pretty much just came out of nowhere. If I had swerved to the right at least a little bit, I would have hit her with my car. I figured if she was willing to risk being hit by a car trying to get somebody's attention, that she must really need some help.
This lady was trying to sort of flag down someone to obviously help her. Alison, for her own safety, drove on a little bit, got to kind of a sign where she could pull over and phoned the police. The police inform Alison that they are on their way and say that she can just go on her travels. She doesn't need to stay there. So that's what Alison does. The police arrive and discover Sherri Papini covered in blood, bruises. All of her long blonde hair has been cut off. She's still in restraints. She looks as though she's lost a lot of weight. She doesn't look well, so they immediately get her to the hospital to be treated. When she's there, she's cooperative, but she's not really answering any questions or giving any information. When the doctors examine her, they see that the bruises are at various different healing stages, which shows that they were inflicted across a certain time period. She has scarring and rashes where her restraints were. She has also been branded on one of her shoulders. They also found 2 DNA samples on her, one male and one female. A few days roll by and the police aren't really getting any information from Sherri, and they need information in order to get the abductors. So they decide to give a tape recorder to her husband, Keith. So he goes in and they discover that Sherri is afraid of the police, mainly because her kidnappers had told her that the police were in on her abduction. They told her that an FBI agent or a police investigator was going to purchase her. So it sounds as though this was a human trafficking case. And because law enforcement was involved in her abduction, she would be gone forever without a trace. This is what her kidnappers told her. Obviously it's not true. But that was the reason Sherri gave for not giving any information over to the police. She told Keith that her abductors were 2 Hispanic women who drove past her whilst she was jogging. They stopped, asked her a few questions, and then pointed a gun at her and forced her to get into the car. They placed something over her head and drove away. She had no idea where they were going, what location they ended up in. After that, they placed her in a dark room, like a cell, and they tortured her and abused her every day. They starved her, giving her very little food, and all she could really remember was that there was Mexican music kind of constantly playing, and also the TV. Sherri said that during her time there, she desperately missed her children and basically got a rolled up cloth and pretended to rock it as though she was rocking her children to sleep.
She took some piece of cloth and rolled it up like it was violet. She would rock it in a bed in her poor face. And I just hugged her, I just held her. I felt like I hugged her for like 20 minutes. I was so happy that she was there, and I was just kissing her all over, and then I got like nauseated just looking at her.
So police want to know, how did she escape? Sherri described to them that that day her 2 abductors began arguing. She then heard gunshots. Several hours later, one of the younger abductors came down, got Sherri and placed her in a car. She again put something over her head and began driving. They got to a certain location and this woman told Sherri to get out. Sherri did, and then she just ran. She ran as fast as she could in order to get away. And that's when she is spotted by Alison Sutton. So the police run these 2 DNA samples that they get off Sherri, but they don't get any matches on their database. Time begins to go by and the FBI still don't have any leads. So they decide to release some information to the public. The release of this information actually made some members of the public a little skeptical about this case. Sherri was texting a man before she was abducted, and then when she was found, she had male DNA on her. Also, around this time in 2017, a news story came out about Sherri's past, which didn't really put her in a great light. Her sister had accused her of breaking into her home. Her dad thought that when she was younger, she stole some money out of his bank account. And the mum had to file a police report on her because Sherri had inflicted some wounds to herself and was threatening her mum, saying that she was going to blame her for these wounds, basically saying that her mum was abusing her. Also, a few of the investigators were a little skeptical around, how often do you see 2 women abducting another woman? It doesn't really happen. So opinions begin to divide over whether this was a real kidnapping or not. And it remained unsolved for many years until March 2022, when Sherri Papini is arrested by the FBI. They approach her and say that her car has been in an accident in order to get her away from her children. They don't want her children witnessing their mother being arrested. When she is outside, the FBI begin to officially arrest her, but she gets very angry. She's screaming, she throws her phone, she does not want to be charged with anything. She makes such a fuss, and this sort of attempt at arresting her goes on for so long that her children exit the building they were in and do witness their mother being arrested and taken to the station. So why does the FBI believe that Sherri faked it? That male DNA that was found on her matched to an ex-boyfriend, James Reese. They got his DNA by searching through his trash. Initially, they got a partial hit through like a 23andMe site from a relative of his. They looked at that person's family and saw James and realised that he was an ex of Sherri. So in August 2020, 2 years prior to Sherri's arrest, they bring James in for questioning and he admits everything. He says, yep, she was at my house for 3 weeks. We kind of faked it all. I picked her up that day on the 16th of November and she stayed at my house. I helped her inflict wounds on herself. I put her in a dark room. I covered all the windows as per her instructions. When he was asked, why did you do this? He said that Sherri told him that her husband Keith was abusing her sexually and physically. He said during those 3 weeks, Sherri regularly harmed herself, and he even got like a wooden burning set in order to brand her on her right shoulder. So James had dated Sherri back in 2006. This was prior to her first marriage. He said that even back then, she was attention hungry. She would lie, she would make up stories. She was just kind of trouble in a way. He said that prior to the abduction, they communicated through prepaid phones, which the FBI actually got hold of these phones, analysed them, and confirmed James's version of events. James's cousin also confirmed that he had seen Sherri twice during the so-called abduction period at James's house. On the day that Sherri supposedly escapes from her abductors, James states that he rented a car and they both drove sort of for a couple of hours and then she just kind of got out. The FBI also confirmed through a car rental agency that this did happen. When they go to James's house and see the room that Sherri was kept in, like she had fully committed to this story and this process. All the windows were blacked off, like it was a darkened room. But why? Why had she done it? So they bring Sherri in for questioning, and with her is her husband Keith. They present her with some of this new information, but Sherri is sticking to her original story. She's saying she was abducted by 2 Hispanic women and she didn't want to actually throw the one that let her escape under the bus, because if it wasn't for her, Sherri wouldn't be alive today. After some time, the FBI agree that perhaps Keith should leave the room. Once Keith is gone, they present Sherri with even more information that they have, and this is when she begins to open up and tell the true events that happened in those 3 weeks. So Sherri had faked it all, and to this day the true reason isn't really known. Perhaps it was just all for attention. Not only was this a huge waste of time and money, but a GoFundMe page had been set up to hire a private investigator to try to find Sherri. After she returned, Keith banked this money, and I think it totaled around $32,000. They used this money to pay off some of their credit cards and just spend it on personal use for their family. This is really sad, because a lot of people that go missing genuinely need A, the media coverage and the police involvement, which many don't get, and B, people need these GoFundMe pages, and it kind of puts a dampener on everyone that truly needs this. 6 weeks after her arrest in August, Sherri pleads guilty to fraud, and she is given 18 months in prison and a fine of around $300,000 for wasting public money. In August 2023, she was released from prison and placed in a halfway house. She was there until around October, and from then she has been released. She's on supervised release until 2026. Keith filed for divorce and sole custody of the children days after Sherri pled guilty. He was awarded full custody, and Sherri has visitation rights. He says that he never really speaks to Sherri and only communicates to her through official routes. Regarding the children, Keith states, "A lot of their childhood years were, in my opinion, stolen from them. So my biggest goal is giving them a happy and healthy life and surrounding them with loving people." Sherri now lives in Northern California, and it's rumoured that she has a new boyfriend and is planning on writing her own book. That was the case of Sherri Papini. If you like my content, please remember to like, subscribe and comment, and I will see you in the next one.